All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast, and I'm happy to welcome back friend of the show, the Bulwark's Will Saletan. Will, how you doing, man?
Fine. It's a little crazy. I wasn't expecting to have federal troops going into Los Angeles early in this administration, but here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, when I booked you, this was not happening, so we might have been talking about something else. But I can't imagine we couldn't talk. We would talk about anything but this, at least to lead. So let's start. I am very, I don't want to say conflicted, but I have mixed emotions about all of this. I'm torn over different parts of the story. But why don't you kick it off? What is your take on what is happening in Los Angeles?
So we're both torn, and we may be torn for the same reasons. And I'm going to just guess that in your case, it's like, well, law and order, but federal seizure of state, assets and usurpation of control. Anyway, I am simultaneously unhappy that this is about illegal immigration, where I believe that conservatives are in principle correct, that people shouldn't be coming to this country illegally. If they do so, they should be deported, and that protesters shouldn't be interfering with the lawful functions of law enforcement and trying to execute that. And B, I'm completely horrified and more disturbed by the federal government coming in, not just the federal government, but one man, Donald Trump, seizing control, A, of the military, B, supplanting federal local law enforcement with the military. So I'm much more concerned about the creeping authoritarianism than I am about the protesters, but they're working together. So tell me if I've just stolen your take or if you get a different one.
Definitely part of my take, but then it's even more complicated because of the subplots, right? And you hinted at some of them, but like, is this a one-off, or is Donald Trump trying to normalize the using of troops against domestic adversaries? And then the sort of the backdrop of the parade, the military parade happening, the fact that Trump pardoned his own supporters who engaged in a real, insurrection, but says you're not going to spit on cops to these other protesters. The fact that it seems like he's going to LA but not Texas, which I don't think is a coincidence. They've decided to, go after people working at Home Depot or meeting at Home Depot to try to be like construction workers or whatever, rather than targeting criminals like they originally said. So, yeah, there's a lot of layers here. And I mean, look, anyone who's probably not a political columnist doesn't realize the problem this creates, because what basically makes for good political commentary, whether you're on TV or writing a column, is having a very strong take. And so this sort of nuance that we're engaging in right now is difficult because this, as you know, Will, this is politically speaking, Trump is on the right side politically with most Americans, right? They're going to see violence. Violence is bad. They're seeing the Mexican flags. Well, that ain't good in America. So it's problematic.
In lots of ways. And for all the reasons that you just articulated, this is why Trump is doing it. So look, normally the president's job in this situation is to try to calm things down, to quell the violence, quell the protests, assure people that the law is being executed faithfully without, but Trump is not trying to pacify, and this is Newsom's point. And look, I don't trust Gavin Newsom, but he's right that Trump is trying to escalate this. And what people need to understand about Trump is he is following an authoritarian playbook. And this is what authoritarians do in other countries. In other countries, authoritarians often rise to power by putting themselves in opposition to genuine problems. Think about Orban in Hungary or other. I mean, the migration in Europe. Whenever you have uncontrolled migration, which has been a problem in all of the Western countries, there's going to be a temptation. There's a lane for someone to run for office as an authoritarian, saying, "I will protect you. I will enforce the laws. I will lock down our country." There's in every Western European country, there are parties that say this. Some of them get elected. Trump Trump is in that lane. So it's not that there isn't a real problem, but the fact that there is a real problem with the illegal immigration does not exclude that the authoritarian is capitalizing on that to expand his power. And his goal is not to solve the problem. His goal is to expand his power.
Yes. But man, it makes it so hard for whether you're someone who's trying to write a column that has a clear take on this, or whether you're an activist who is trying to prevent Trump's authoritarian, power grab. Good luck making that argument to average Americans, because again, the optics are just really horrible. You do have people engaged in real violence. You have people. I was watching Morning Joe this morning. This is on MSNBC, and all of their shots, you see Mexican flags being waved. So if this isn't just, these aren't deep fakes. This isn't Mountainhead imagining this. Like, this is really happening.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dig in on the flags for a minute, because this drives me nuts. You imagine that you are trying to mount a resistance to the authoritarian. Okay, he's chosen immigration. You believe that. Let's take your case, Matt. He said he would go after the criminals. He's not just going after the criminals, right? He's going after everybody. He's going after the Home Depot, anybody who's any place of employment that might have someone who is not necessarily a criminal, just like an ordinary person who came here illegally. Okay, so you would like to have a favorable context for making your case that this is not we should not have jackbooted thugs. The federal government shouldn't be coming in and doing this. Meanwhile, all it takes is one jackass with a Mexican flag, one abolish police graffitist, right? Which is, I've seen that one already, right? Somebody throwing bricks through the window of an ICE van or whatever. It just takes a few of those. That's what's going to be on TV. All of your peaceful protests, those don't make good TV. These wackos make good TV, and they help Trump because he just wants the whole fight to be about him and the guys with the Mexican flags, the guys in the masks, the guys throwing the bricks, and he gets it.
I really recommend, Malcolm Gladwell's had a lot of big books that got a lot of maybe too much celebration, but he had a book called David versus Goliath that I thought was probably underrated. And each chapter is a different example of a David versus a Goliath, but one of them has to do with civil rights in America. And it really makes you just appreciate the amount of planning and discipline that Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights activists had in terms of being aware of the optics and portraying, peaceful protest. Very important, and perhaps the activists in Los Angeles could take a page from that lesson.
Yeah, people forget this. When you're doing a big confrontation and you're a resistance movement, you really want to choose your context. You want to choose your protagonist, right? Rosa Parks was chosen, right? There are a lot of cases that they could have. You find the right plaintiff because you don't want the context to have all sorts of messy stuff. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, not really the greatest protagonist, right? A guy who beat up his wife or his girlfriend, who allegedly, I should say.
Yeah. And let me ask you, Will. Yeah. I hate to interrupt because you're making a great point, but I have wondered. There's the gay hairdresser, which I think was a more compelling example, and there were several people who were innocent who were sent to this, CICOT or whatever it's called, this gulag in El Salvador. Why is it that Abrego was the poster boy when others seem to be maybe more sympathetic examples?
Was it? Well, I thought it was because of the error that they made, and he was literally not the guy they were supposed to. They admitted that it was a mistake. Right. Yeah. It was known. I don't remember in the context of the hairdresser what the facts of the case were. So it's a kind of a classic liberal thing where you focus on what is technically correct, that it was an administrative error. So this is a really good case if you're a lawyer to argue, but it's not a good case as a story for the public, as a narrative. This is not the guy you particularly want. And there's also a temptation to believe that if once you settle on somebody that he's the hero, and then you sort of forget the more they found out about him, the more, it was easy for the Trumpers to pull up the stuff about the domestic abuse. Now they're going to have an actual trial. They're going to have a prosecution of him for, what was it, trafficking. Sorry, talking about Abrego Garcia here. And that's fine. That's the liberals should be happy with that. We're going to follow the law and see what happens. It's just that as a narrative, he isn't. You're right. It would have been better to choose the hairdresser or somebody else.
So I know that this isn't exactly related, but I wanted to ask you about the travel ban, which has also just been implemented. Shades of Donald Trump's first term. He's playing some of his greatest hits, but do you see that being related to this protest story?
Yeah, I very much do. So just to come back to my original point, I really am uncomfortable with the fact that the whole context for fighting Trump's latest federal usurpation of state power, bringing, the authoritarianism, is illegal immigration. The travel ban that Trump just imposed, just for people who don't know the context of this. So when was the attack in Boulder? A week ago, a couple of weeks ago?
It feels like months ago, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember now.
Pretty recent.
The guy is an Egyptian national. So Trump seizes on this to announce that he's going to do a travel ban. And for folks who don't remember, in his first term, he tried to do, before he was president, when he ran for president, he said, I'm going to, ban all travel from Muslim countries. At which point Mike Pence and a bunch of other people stood up and said, actually, you can't do that. That's like religious discrimination. So then Trump modifies it to countries from which there's been terrorism, which happens to correlate with a lot of Muslim majority countries. But at least it has this little fig leaf. And now they've improved it to where they actually define. We're suspending travel from 12 countries. Again, most of them, if not nearly all of them, majority Muslim countries. But they've listed because the vetting isn't good enough, or there isn't enough cooperation on security, which are legitimate reasons to, suspend immigration temporarily. But the point is, this is all legal migration. He's saying you can't come in here legally, which is a very different context from the illegal stuff. And I wish that, that this whole fight were in a context that was about legal migration, because then you can make the case that liberals want to make, that Trump really just wants to stop Muslims or brown people or people of this faith or that nationality. Here, where the context in LA, the context is enforcing laws against illegal immigration, it's just not good grounds, because Trump can pose as the guy who believes in law and order, which I don't believe he does, but he can say that.
Well, and I think this is a very good political situation for Donald Trump. First of all, he actually ran on this. People forget, but yeah, they had signs like at the Republican convention saying mass deportations now or something like that. I wrote a column right after Trump was, I guess, inaugurated at the Hill, where I said, this is he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. But in the case of things like tariffs, which he said he was going to do, maybe not to the extent that he did them, I think that hurt him. I think it backfired. I wonder, is he changing the subject now from tariffs and from Elon? He had this big fight with Elon Musk about the big, beautiful bill. And now that seems like a million years ago. And it seems like maybe what's happening in Los Angeles is allowing Musk and Trump to patch things up.
Yeah, well, imagine a world where the LA thing hadn't happened. I think in that world, still, the Trump-Musk thing fizzles quickly. And it fizzles because Musk tucks his tail between his legs. It's not hard to figure out what's going on here. One guy is deleting his worst tweets about the other guy. The second guy, Trump, isn't deleting a damn thing. He's standing by everything he said. I mean, he said all kinds of stuff about what he could do to punish Elon, right? And so the power imbalance between them is very clear. And we've had some really good stuff. Jonathan Last and Bill Kristol and others in the Bulwark have been writing about this. This was settled very clearly in favor of Trump and in favor of political power versus economic power, right? Musk, he's so rich. He has this massive following. This is the biggest guy yet to take on Trump, and he's going to really tear apart the coalition. Well, it turns out that if you have the power of the United States government, you can threaten to cancel all of the contracts for the rich guy, right?
Yeah.
that's a lot of leverage. And I hate to say it, but the oligarchs in Russia found out the hard way that the guy with the political power was the one who could throw them in jail, for God's sake.
Well, but Musk also has a long tradition of kowtowing to political power. He did it with China, so why not do it in America and with our regime?
Yeah, I guess. And the other thing about Musk is, like, Trump is nuts, but Musk is like allegedly, reportedly on drugs a lot. He
Yeah.
certainly behaves like a guy who's on drugs a lot, right? And part of that is you're so erratic. So it's not like things who God knows, Matt, God knows under what physical conditions Elon Musk tweeted that Donald Trump was in the Epstein files and was covering them up for that reason, right? I'm sure he just threw everything at the wall. So we don't know what physical state Musk was in, but there's a reasonable guess that shortly thereafter, he was in a different physical state in which he was able to think more clearly and perhaps reconsidered some of his crazy stuff. So the fact that Trump is at least not on drugs gives him a little bit of extra strength and solidity in this confrontation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow. No, but the whole thing with Musk reminded me a little bit of Kanye and a little bit of Charlie Sheen with the whole tiger blood. And usually it lasts for a while, for a few weeks, and then they kind of go dark. Elon didn't make it a few weeks. He made it a few days, I think. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's possible that Elon threw out this stuff about how I'm the reason Trump got elected, and all I have to do is tell people to oppose the big, beautiful bill, and Congress will fall in line behind me, or at least enough. And it's possible that he floated that and just discovered that silence, nobody followed him. I mean, not that they're Twitter influencers, right, who are following Musk. They're Musk fans, but like all he had to do was like move, like 3 votes in the House, 2 votes in the House, and on the big bill, and that would be enough to like scare Trump. And what have you heard, Matt? I haven't heard a damn thing.
yeah, no, super interesting, right? You want to talk about Donald Trump's hold on the Republican Party? Pretty strong, right?
What has changed? It's like, look, you remember back when the Republican Party had a platform and stood for things, and now that that's gone, like, it's just amazing the hold that one man can have once the analogy that's coming to mind is your daughter meets some guy and he tells her, like, get rid of your friends, cut off your family, and do all this. And she does it like, and now she's got nothing to hold on to against him, right? So these Republicans, like, they've abandoned things they used to believe in. They've, like, anybody who opposed Trump is gone from the party. So there is no organizing principle other than this guy. So whatever he does, remember when Republicans stood for the 10th Amendment? Remember when they believed in states?
Yeah.
Well, didn't Bob Dole make a big deal about this a couple of decades, 30 years ago? That's just gone, right? So we have the president of the United States says, okay, there's a confrontation in a state in Los Angeles and California, and I'm going to preemptively federalize the National Guard and send them in. I'm going to send Marines in, right? And okay, George H.W. Bush sent in the National Guard, but that was with the authorization from the governor and the mayor back in the day, right? Trump says, I'm not going to do that. And there used to be a Republican Party that believed in something that would have allowed them to stand up to that and say, no, we believe in local control. We believe in state control. We don't want big government. We don't want what they used to call jackbooted thugs. And now they're all for the jackbooted thugs. Whatever Trump says, send in the Guard, send in the Marines. They're just going to fall in line. They are falling in line.
Indeed. All right. Well, last topic, I think, is RFK Jr. firing this, Commission on Immunization.
The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices.
There you go. Bailing me out again. Doing the host duties and the guest duties. I love it. Well, and apparently he lied, right? Was it Senator, you tell me.
Cassidy.
from
Yeah.
Louisiana, right? I'm so prepared today. Um, yeah. So, I mean, on one hand, it's not really that much of a surprise. I think we knew that Bobby Kennedy was an anti-vaxxer, and this makes perfect sense. But on the other hand, it wasn't that. It's not like he waited 3 years to do this. This is like you said. What are we, like 4 months into the administration? It's already
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. I've actually been working on a project that's related to COVID, so that's why I happen to know the name of the committee. But it's been fascinating. This is, from my point of view, the other madness in the Republican Party. So one of them is the authoritarianism, which we just discussed. This trajectory from believing in liberty to whatever the president says. The other one is the science stuff. This used to be the party of science. George W. Bush was the president who instituted PEPFAR, AIDS relief. And now this Republican Party has abandoned not just providing vaccines to other countries, but researching vaccines, making vaccines available to Americans for people who don't understand the implications of what Kennedy just did. So he's getting rid of this advisory committee. He's saying that they're all in the pocket of big pharma or they have conflicts of interest. First of all, it's a lie. There's a lot of regulation about what these people are allowed to do, when they have to recuse themselves. They're all screened for conflicts of interest. He also, as you point out, lied to Senator Cassidy when he said that he wouldn't alter this committee. He just like completely gutted it. And in place of people who Kennedy says are in the pocket of big pharma, which is a lie, he's going to put his own people. And it's like the eternal story, Matt. You have a bias. We're going to get rid of your biased people and replace them with my unbiased people, which everybody knows is going to have Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s bias, which is, I wouldn't call it exactly against vaccines, but vaccines skeptical. So they're going to raise the threshold. So the COVID vaccines, they're going to make them do brand new clinical trials every time they have a new round of boosters. This is not normal practice. It's just to raise the threshold, to make it more difficult. And the effect on you people out there, real people, is that you won't be able to get insurance coverage for these vaccines. They won't be approved. Some of them won't be available to you. You're not 65. You don't have an underlying condition. You won't be able to get the COVID vaccine, or your insurance provider won't cover it. So your expenses go up, and it just makes it more difficult for people who don't have means to afford this. So under the guise of just questioning the science, they're imposing their anti-vaccine or vaccine hostile agenda.
Definitely. I definitely think that's true. One of the things that I think I'm really coming to terms with right now in this Trump administration is how like the feedback mechanisms for governing are so far down the road, right? So it used to be a president dead or said something crazy or controversial, and they would get an immediate feedback, right? Because it would be public opinion or chastisement. And oftentimes you would see people back down or reverse. I do think that worked with Donald Trump in the case of the tariffs. But in the case of so many things that Trump is doing, I think it's going to be years before. So, for example, with the changes to the CDC, I mean, there could be outbreaks and major problems, but it's going to be a lagging indicator. I mean, it could be 5 to 10 years before something Bobby Kennedy breaks actually manifests. And I think in the case of the erosion of liberal democracy and the authoritarianism, it's a similar thing. Like some of the things that he's doing today, um, it's like every time you chop an axe at a tree, you're doing damage, but no one can see it until finally the tree falls over. And it might be a windstorm a year from now that causes that to happen. What do you make of that, Will? Am I going crazy here, or is that true?
Matt, you are not pessimistic enough. I'll make you a simple case for that. First of all, you're absolutely correct. Some of this stuff will take a long time. There will be some pandemic years from now that, because we've just cut off funding for research on vaccines and on viruses and other things, it will be much worse because of that. But think about what just happened. We just had a pandemic in which Donald Trump was the president. And he did crazy things like, say, slow the testing down, right? And, promote like quack cures that weren't real. And tell people like, it's over, get out there and like recirculate, and wouldn't wear a mask and all this stuff. He already did this. And so many people died. Extra people died in that pandemic because of Trump's crazy policies and his crazy ideas. And then we reelected him. So it's not just that it will take a long time. It's that even when the disaster happens, the memory is so short, or there's some other issue that comes up and people say, yeah, let's bring that guy back. So I'm really depressed that we have failed to impose the discipline that you just described, the feedback, and B, even when it happens, it's quickly forgotten, and we just we don't learn our lessons, and we forget them so easily.
Well, and look, I see this in so many different places. And my wife has a podcast called The Poisoning and a newsletter. It's about fentanyl poisoning. And as you probably know, Will, in the last year or so, we've seen overdoses dramatically decline of fentanyl and opioid overdoses. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. But one of the reasons, the availability of naloxone, Narcan, which Trump may be cutting the funding for, RFK and Trump. There's reports that could happen. And it's like, well, this is something that's been a success. This has been successful. Why would you back away from, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why would you back away from a winning formula? Like, that's just one of probably a million things out there that they could be messing up that you wouldn't see the results, or you wouldn't be able to document the and how do you even know if, like, maybe because of various factors, the decline continues, but not at the same rate it would have continued. So there could be, tens of thousands of people who would have been saved if they had kept funding naloxone. And you get where I'm going with this. Hard to quantify.
Very hard, and so easy. We like to think, us sort of nerds, that there are going to be some statistics that will show that people will persuade the public, hey, this was a failure, this was a mistake. Fentanyl deaths went back up. That's because we cut these programs, restore the programs. We don't know that for sure. And there's lots of examples of people being snowed, being persuaded by the powers that be, that actually there's some other reason, as you just discussed. What was the example I was thinking of? The tariffs, right? The tariffs are a manifest disaster. The markets dived. That was an objective indicator. Then Trump sort of fakes like, well, I'm going to be negotiating with all these countries. The market goes back up. Meanwhile, Trump has created this alternate math, this alternate statistic of investment in America. We're going to keep the tariffs, the baseline tariffs of 10% everywhere, right? And whatever damage that's doing, according to the markets, is overcome by these trillions and trillions of dollars that are coming into America. Because I go around to the Persian Gulf and they're all pledging, I'm going to invest in some plant in America, right? So he's invented this statistic, which, correct me if I'm wrong, nobody but Donald Trump seems to be like tracking this. This is his own invented metric. We don't even know how much of this is actually going to materialize. Oh, Sheikh so-and-so says I pledge, some businessman in Thailand says I pledge, right? We don't know. And Lordstown, notoriously like a mirage, right? So he's invented this statistic, and it may be that by claiming, in the midterms, or Republicans claiming in the 2028 election that this statistic outweighs whatever damage happened to the stock market or to employment, that that Republicans get reelected in those elections. So we just don't know if the lies and the distraction and the fabricated statistics are going to prevail.
Wow. Oh, you've really depressed me today, Will.
Sorry.
But that's okay. That's all right. It's early in the week. I could rebound. Anything you want to plug? Final thoughts?
I'm pissed off today, Matt, because I'm like working on a story about the LA riots and about the contrasting it with January 6th. And damned if the New York Times didn't run their version of the story last night. So now I've got to work around that. Not that ever stops the New York Times from stepping on our stories.
No one knows. We are the real heroes, I have to say. Hardest hit, America's political columnists, as usual.
We suffer for you.
Will Saletan. Always a pleasure, man. Thanks for coming back on the show.
You too, man. Thanks.